Okay, doke. So, thank you very much for taking the time out to sit down and chat with me about the show. I suppose the
My
first question
pleasure.
is what is the show? Why are we here?
So the show is called Soviet Zion. It is a big, ambitious, mega musical um, set in the far east of Russia. It is about two families who participate in the real life movement to create there, not far from Siberia, a Jewish homeland. And this happened at the beginning of the 20th century, so it was before Israeli independence. And it's a part of history that very few people know much about. I was really surprised to find out about it, and I found it really fascinating. And so I wrote this contemporary opera with Katie Lipson and Roberto Trappini. And 12 years on, after beginning it, 12 years or so, I'm very proud to present the show.
So, you talked a little bit about how you didn't know about this event until you did. Well, that's how things happen. But why did you choose this story to tell?
So Katie and I, you may be familiar with Katie Lipson. She's a prolific producer in the UK and elsewhere. And she and I ran many years ago a theatre company together called the A Stage Kindly New Musical Theatre Initiative. And we produced, I think 16, in a very short space of time, we produced 16 world or UK or world premieres of new musicals. And we had a literary department, and we were regularly receiving and evaluating works, and many of them were absolutely terrific. But we weren't finding many musicals in the style of those shows that really got us excited into the theatre in the first place. You know, I'm a sucker for Les Mis, Phantom, Chess, Rags, all those big operatic symphonic shows. So we wanted to write something in that style, and we wanted to write something to celebrate our shared cultural heritage. We've come from different Jewish backgrounds. We wanted to tell not a Jewish story, but something that drew from that heritage. But we knew what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to do something from ancient history. We didn't want to do anything directly to do with the Holocaust, because we felt that that's not really a subject that lends itself well to. It's not an appropriate thing. It's often not a subject that lends itself well to being told through musical. So we had an idea of what we didn't want to do, and we were thinking about what we might want to do. And I came back from the Middle East. I was on a trip called Taglit Birthright, which is like a 10-day adventure around Israel for people who haven't been before. So you go there and you find out about its history, and I came back full of questions about how do I, as a European person, relate to this idea of belonging in the Middle East? And I was really full of questions about how to reconcile these two very distinct cultural identities. And I wanted to write something that got to explore these concepts, but I wanted to do it in a way that didn't really involve the Arab-Israeli conflict or current events in the Middle East. And this seemed like a really fascinating way to explore really interesting political themes and socioeconomic themes and cultural themes. And it just seemed like a really fascinating framework in which to tell a story. And I wanted to throw kind of archetypal characters who are very Jewish characters, very distinctively Jewish characters, that are completely different from each other into a crazy situation, see how they might react. So we have these very old world characters, think Fiddler on the Roof, very shtetl, and then we have the very brash American characters, who are, and they're completely opposing. They're not opposing, but they're completely different from each other. And I wanted to see how these characters would interact given this very curious and specific political situation.
So obviously the musical it's told through opera. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, it's told through opera, so there's very little dialogue.
Yes, there is dialogue. The show was originally conceived as a song through opera, as a song through modern opera, and as the show developed and as we workshopped it, and it just became clear that the speed at which you can deliver information to an audience, emotional information and information is different. Mm-hmm. But the rate at which you can deliver specific information to an audience through, I'm sorry, I've worded this sentence really strangely. What I was trying to say was involving speech and dialogue means that we were able to deliver a much greater tapestry of complexity and nuance. And we can have people bicker and oh, sorry, the dog's wet on the camera. We were able to really develop these characters and give, as well as an emotional understanding of how they feel, which is what the music does. Through the dialogue, we're able to get a really gritty understanding of who they are and how they're relating to each other.
So, obviously, like you said, it's based on the events that actually happened, but not many people know of. So, you're not only entertaining, you're also educating at the same time. So, I can see how that being sung through could be somewhat overwhelming because you're learning about this event and the characters, and whereas dialogue, like you said, gives you an insight as to the characters, how they think, how they work, how they function. So that's a lot easier to understand and comprehend. So what was the journey like creating it? You said it's 12 years in the making?
The project was begun 12 years ago. And most of the writing actually took place back in the day. I mean, there's been a lot of excising and cutting and butchering and stitching things back together, and a lot of the songs that are now 1 minute long interludes, which are very powerful, and many reviewers have said that's some of the highlights of the show, are these very short musical snippets, these little windows into people's thoughts. A lot of those very short segments were full songs, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, structured very differently. Repeat your question, because I feel like I've gone off on a tangent.
So it's the journey of it going from that original idea now to the album.
That's right. So I first came up with a treatise or a concept of the idea. I took it to Katie, who was my creative partner, and we discussed it. The idea turned into a libretto. I say a libretto, that's very generous. It was a collection of ideas, let's say. We set it to music, and then kind of retroactively refitted it, which is not the way you're supposed to go about things. And that's maybe why it took 12 years, because we did not create this in perhaps the most sensible way. For anyone who is looking to write a musical, I very, very strongly recommend a book by Julian Woolford called How Musicals Work and How to Write Your Own, something like that. When I write another show, I'm going to find that an invaluable resource, because it gives you a very clear insight as to how to structure your thoughts. We decided rather to reinvent the wheel, and it took us 12 years. But so we created this libretto. We workshopped some scenes with it with students at, I think it was the Royal College or the Royal Academy, it was a long time ago. We staged a little workshop of it, put it on its feet. We had a fantastic dramaturge and director called Vic Sivalingam. He's a wonderful guy, and he had a lot of patience for us putting this thing on its feet. So we put it on its feet, put it in front of an audience, got some very constructive criticism, which is all valid. I mean, as a writer, it's very difficult to hear criticisms, but after I got over myself, I realized that everything everyone said was completely valid and useful. I took it on board. And at that point, we realized that in order to tell this story as best we can, it would be better to involve dialogue. So we partnered with Roberto Trappini, who is an Italian chap, an extraordinary clever. I mean, he's like a savant. He knows everything about everything, and he's very familiar with the politics of that time in a way that when I started writing this, I certainly wasn't. So it was very useful having someone who knew the timeline and the greater context of the story we were telling. So we involved him, and he completely chopped it all up and put it all back together. And then we worked together to develop these characters. They suddenly became so much more fleshed out. We had such a clear idea of who was who and what was what, and we got rid of some terrible ideas. I'm not going to pretend that there weren't some awful ideas. The leading lady, the poor thing, originally she had lost a child who froze to death, had another one that got eaten by a bear, and then later on she went blind. It was a real tragedy. And there was a whole third act that's been cut, in which another family came, but we realized what was and wasn't important, and that it would be quite mean to put an actress through that kind of, every night to do all of that. So me and Sapper was a bit kinder to that character. And then we put it back on stage, the new version with the dialogue, at the London Jewish Museum, and it transferred briefly to the Lost Theatre, which I don't think exists anymore, down in South London. I was directed by Brona Lagan, and we had a fantastic cast, a really awesome cast. And shortly after that, I came to America. For my weird accents, you're wondering where that's from. And it's very different for me over here, because back in the UK, I have a wide network of people that I can collaborate with, be creative with. There's a whole community of people that encourage each other creatively, and that there isn't that here in this part of the world. It's just culturally, it's just a very different. It's just very different, and so work or kind of progress stalled somewhat because I'm on the other side of the ocean from my creative team. I'm kind of at a loss. And after a while, I actually met online on a website called Fiverr, which connects freelance people. I met a very amazingly talented guy who I'm yet to meet, bizarrely enough. We've worked together for a long time, very intensely, and made a great friendship, but we've never met face to face. He lives, I think, somewhere beginning with M. I don't know, but it's miles in another state. And he is a film score composer and a computer game scorer, and uses a totally different technological approach to orchestrating things than perhaps one would traditionally do in the theatre. And so normally if you're trying to orchestrate for the theatre for a live show, you're going to think, well, how big is the orchestra pit? So how many musicians can I physically fit in? How many tickets am I likely to sell? So how much money can I afford to spend on an orchestra? And how few musicians can I get away with to create as big a sound as possible with as few, with as little expenditure? And so there's lots of considerations there that that I was quite lucky to be emancipated from working with this guy. So also, if you're going to orchestrate for an orchestra, you're writing you're, writing dots on the page, music manuscript, and then you have that, and then it has to be printed, and then you have to give it to musicians and rehearse them and record them, and it's a huge expense. It's a really enormous undertaking. And so working with this guy, we were able to be emancipated from those considerations and work with totally different parameters. So I said, well, let's just throw in all the bells and whistles. And so we did. We have in the brass section, 666 tubas. We have a gong the size of the side of a house. We have 2 duduks. We don't just have clarinets. We have clarinets, bass clarinets, sub-bass clarinets, sub-contrabass clarinets. We have a full giant symphonic orchestra that could never possibly even fit in an aircraft hangar. And we've used this sampling technology to make the sound. Essentially, it's the same. What we were going for was the similar sound that they use in Marvel movies, and Hans Zimmer kind of sound. That was wonderful. So I got to hear what in my head I'd only ever really got to hear playing at a piano. I get now to hear with this huge orchestra, which is so glorious, and with all these ethnic instruments, electric guitars, and whatever our imagination wanted, which was wonderful. And of course, these tracks enabled a whole different outlook for the project, because, one second, you all right, doggy? Catching his breath. I was saying, because these tracks mean that it could be performed in much smaller spaces and still deliver an enormous, uncompromised symphonic sound. So we can go to old people's homes, we can go to community centers, we could go to any number of smaller spaces. And it means the show is very accessible to theatre companies in a way that it would never have been before. And of course, perhaps most excitingly, it enabled the concept album, which we recorded in November. So the stars aligned. We were able to put in an application to the Arts Council, and they very generously supported the project. And in the height of lockdown, you can't imagine in the height of lockdown, with every possible drama happening, we had to rehearse in masks and visors, which is quite difficult to do when you're singing. So I had no idea how it would sound until, because one of the main exciting things about this score is the wonderful ensemble material. It's huge. And the way I had arranged these is I put singers through their paces. It's one of the distinctive features of my writing. I'm a bit touch the devil in what I expect people to be able to do vocally. And in the ensemble material, people are singing throughout their entire range, at the very top, at the very bottom. And the idea was, in my head, the sound, as people would kind of go through these extremes of their voice, it was kind of connecting in a vortex like this. And in my head, it was going to be wonderful, but I had no idea whether it was going to actually work. And I didn't even know that in the room. And so it wasn't until everyone had recorded their tracks and we had them all layered and mixed that the sound came together. And I'll tell you, it was as much a relief as it was extremely exciting. It sounded great. But yeah, we had you know what, it's literally a whole hour I could talk about the crazy dramas we had to do. We had to take over a school. We had to because we lost our recording studio because all the non-essential businesses had to close. So on a Sunday with 24 hours to spare, or less than, like 8 hours to spare, we had to hire in all this equipment, take over a whole floor of a school, set it up into a recording studio, socially distance everyone, air the rooms out every few minutes. There was a lot going on. And it was unforgettable, I tell you that. It was an experience. And we literally by the stroke of of miracles. We finished recording at we literally recorded the last line that we had to have done on the last possible minutes that we had before we had to vacate the premises and close down. It was to the wire. But miraculously, not only did we record the full concept album, which is the full show from front to back, from the time the curtain rises till it closes. One reviewer said, close your eyes and it's like the whole show taking place in your imagination. And we recorded that. We also recorded a bonus album of selections from the show translated into Yiddish, which is another thing I've been working on whilst I was here in America. I met a young lady, and it's rare as hen's teeth to meet people who speak Yiddish. I mean, there's very few of them. And to meet a first language speaker, especially outside of New York, it's very, very rare. Yeah. So I met her, it was very serendipitous, and she's a poet. And I said, oh, would you like to translate this show? It'll be fun. It'll take maybe a week, 2 weeks. Nah, did it heck. It took well over a year. I think it was a year and a half, pushing 2 years. It was a huge undertaking. What a trooper. And so we have a fully singable translation of the show into Yiddish for whatever good it might do. And we decided to record selections from it. So we have the same cast and a couple of special guests performing a selection of songs in translation. And I'm really proud of that, even though it's a very niche, it's a very niche thing to do. That really, I feel like that, I'm not sure why it was so important to me to get it done, but that's one of the things I'm most proud of. So I hope one day to see that on stage.
It adds a layer, doesn't it? Because the story is about this Yiddish-speaking community, and for them to feel not only represented through the narrative, but also for the whole score to be translated, it's just that whole nother layer of representation, which, they all find fantastic. I personally think it's incredible. So congrats on that. So kind of what's next for the show, and where can people stay up to date with the musical and the rest of its journey?
Well, I can't tell you too much about something that I have forthcoming, but I am working on a really exciting surprise. That's going to make quite a splash, I hope. Thank you, Boo. Again, I can't tell you about it, but keep your eyes peeled, because something really exciting is coming within the next month or so. But people can stay up to date through our Instagram. The handle is @SovietZion. The best place to find out all the information about the show, and you can hear lots of example tracks and the sheet music and all sorts there, is sovietzion.com. And the sheet music is available for anyone who wishes to use it in auditions. If you are looking for some legit singing, especially soprano stuff that's going to make the walls shake, then there's some good songs there for you. And yeah, if you're interested in meaty musicals, big symphonic heavy, I feel like there are some musicals that you hear, which is a great thing, that you hear it once and you get it. I felt that way. I think I was however many years old I was when I saw Cats. I just absorbed the whole thing as if I was a sponge, and I just got it, and it was indelibly stuck in my mind. I think this is more like a show like, I don't know if I should be comparing my work to other people's, but a show like Nixon in China, which is a contemporary opera by John Adams. That's one of my favorite works, because I listen to it and I listen to it and I listen to it, and I always find something else to go, wow, I didn't notice that. That's a really interesting lyric or a perspective or use of the orchestra, or so I hope that people will enjoy this in a way that they can come back to it many times and find it's a very musically. I think it's not just musically, but it's quite a meaty, complex piece. So I hope people can come back to it, and hopefully it will make people think about their own sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really, that's what the show is all about, really. It's about, it's obviously how do people cope in a failed state when they've invested their entire dreams in building utopia, and they arrive and actually they have to make do in a completely different situation than they were expecting. So it's certainly about that, and the trials of the human spirit. She no longer goes blind and has all those terrible things happening, but she certainly gets put through it.
Yeah.
The lead character, so it's the triumph of strength of character in the face of adversity, and what to do when you kind of get what you want, but it isn't really what you want.
Yeah.
But really, the show is about belonging, and people who feel comfortable belonging where they are should consider themselves very lucky, because there are so many people around the world at different points in history who feel unwelcome, who don't feel at home where they are, or who experience, refugee or asylum experiences. There's if you feel that you are at home and you belong where you are, you're very lucky. And I hope that this piece might make people question how other people don't necessarily have that same sense of security, and how might one go about achieving that. So those are the kinds of themes that it explores, and I think that those are universal themes. This is not. It's clearly the story is about Jewish people trying to establish a Jewish state, but the themes of identity and belonging are definitely universal, I think.
Yeah, it's not a Jewish story. It's a story involving Jewish people, and obviously everyone can take something out of it and relate in some senses to the story. So obviously that is incredible for listeners to feel seen, but also you've got the added layer of it's education as well as entertainment. So that's all my questions. So thank you very much for sitting down and chatting with me. I will put all the links and the social media in the description. But again, yes, thank you very much for sitting down and chatting with me. So I shall see you soon. Thank you very much.
It has been my absolute pleasure, and I hope your listeners will enjoy discovering the show. And thank you very much again for taking the time to support my work, and for asking me these questions. It's been really interesting and a pleasure to answer them.
Thank you very much. Speak to you soon. Bye.